Dear viewers, in part 1, we followed the magical journey of the black boy Lucas after his fateful encounter with billionaire Thomas Harris. The lives of each character in the story have turns, awakenings, strong changes with interesting surprises, but also full of humanity, which is the birth of an organization to support the black disadvantaged. And I'm sure if you haven't seen our part 1, you won't want to miss it. So I'll leave it in the comments section for you to follow. Now, let's continue with part 2 to follow the interesting developments. What are we waiting for? Oh, I forgot. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me with one like, one share, as well as comment your thoughts below to spread the good things of the story. Now let's start the story. 3 decades had passed since that hot afternoon in rural Texas. Thomas Harris had lived a long, prosperous life, becoming a legend in his own right. His fortune had grown far beyond what he could have imagined, and his philanthropic efforts, especially with the Heart of Austin Foundation, had made a significant impact. Thomas had never married, and his legacy was passed down through his granddaughter, Catherine Harris. Catherine was everything Thomas had hoped for in his successor. She was sharp, driven, and had inherited her grandfather's business acumen, though her true passion lay in law enforcement. At the age of 32, she had already made a name for herself as a rising star in the FBI, known for her keen investigative mind and relentless determination. Despite her career in the FBI, Catherine had always been closely involved with the foundation. She admired her grandfather's work, and his vision for a better world had shaped her own values. Now, with his passing at the age of 103, Catherine found herself not only the head of his estate, but also the new leader of the Heart of Austin Foundation. The foundation had continued to thrive after Thomas's death, and Lucas, the boy from that long ago afternoon, had become the heart of it. Lucas was now in his 40s, and his life had become a testament to the values of kindness and giving that Thomas had instilled in him all those years ago. He had become an influential leader in the Austin community, working tirelessly to continue the mission of the foundation. But all of that changed when Lucas was assassinated in cold blood. The news of his death sent shockwaves through the community. At first, it seemed like a random act of violence. But Catherine, now the head of the foundation and a highly respected investigator, felt there was more to it than met the eye. Her instincts told her that Lucas's death was no accident. Catherine Harris sat in her office at the FBI headquarters, staring blankly at her computer screen. The words "Lucas Carter assassinated" flashed repeatedly on the screen, each time feeling like a blow to her chest. She had never expected that a day would come when she would be forced to confront the death of the man who had been like a second father to her. She leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her dark brown hair. Lucas had always been there, steadfast, kind, and patient, guiding her through her time with the Heart of Austin Foundation. She had watched him grow from a young, determined boy into a well-respected community leader, driven by a passion for helping others. He had never once lost the humility or selflessness that had defined him when they first met. And now he was gone, taken from them in the blink of an eye. The investigation into his death was still in its early stages, but Catherine felt an undeniable pull to get involved. She had heard of violent acts against activists before, but something about this felt different. Something didn't sit right. As the FBI's most dedicated investigator, she knew how to read between the lines, and there was more to Lucas's death than the police were letting on. She pushed herself out of the chair, heading to her office door. Just as she stepped into the hallway, she collided with Agent Marcus Kent, her colleague and a longtime friend. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern written on his face as he helped steady her. Catherine nodded, but didn't speak immediately. Her thoughts were racing. "We need to investigate Lucas's death. I think this was more than just a robbery gone wrong. Someone wanted him dead." Marcus frowned, his gaze focused. "You think it's a targeted attack?" "I'm sure of it," she replied, her voice resolute. "Whoever did this had a clear agenda. They knew exactly who Lucas was." The two of them exchanged a look. It wasn't the first time they had gone after someone with power, But it was different this time. This wasn't just about politics or money. It was personal. Lucas was more than just an activist. He was a symbol of everything they had fought for. "Then we're going to find out who did this," Marcus said with determination. "He'll help you, Catherine. You're not alone in this." With Marcus' support, Catherine felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they began to dive into the investigation, starting with a thorough analysis of the scene where Lucas was murdered. They learned that he had been shot outside his apartment late at night. His death had been swift, almost as if the killers had planned it for weeks, if not months. The police report mentioned that no witnesses had been found, and there were no surveillance cameras in the area. It was a perfect setup, leaving no trace behind. But Catherine knew that the truth always came to the surface eventually. As the investigation progressed, Catherine's search for answers led her to Lucas' son, Jason Carter. Jason was a quiet, introspective man in his late 20s, still deeply affected by the sudden loss of his father. Catherine hadn't seen him in years, but she knew of him. Jason had always been the quiet son, not one to seek the limelight, but deeply committed to his father's work. Catherine had seen Jason grow up as part of the Heart of Austin Foundation, where she had spent much of her time as a child. Now the foundation was at risk of losing everything Lucas had worked for. Jason, however, seemed to be holding it together, though Catherine could see the pain in his eyes whenever they spoke about his father. Catherine found him at the Heart of Austin office one afternoon, staring out the window, deep in thought. The foundation staff had already begun discussing the future, but Jason hadn't made any decisions about the direction they would take. "Jason," Catherine said softly as she entered the room. "We need to talk." He turned toward her, his eyes betraying the exhaustion that had settled on him in the weeks since his father's death. "Catherine," he said, his voice low, "I was hoping you would come by. You know what?" Catherine crossed the room and sat across from him. "I'm here to help," she said. "We need to figure out what happened to your dad. This wasn't a random attack. Someone wanted him gone." Jason nodded slowly, wiping a hand across his face. "I know. I just don't understand why. My dad, he wasn't a threat to anyone. He just wanted to make things better. Someone felt threatened by that," Catherine said, her tone firm. "Lucas was a powerful man, and unfortunately, sometimes that makes you a target." Jason's hands trembled as he placed them on the desk. "Who would do this to him?" "Why?" Catherine leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. I'm investigating it on my own, at least until the FBI assigns more resources. I need your help, Jason. Anything you can tell me about your father's last few weeks, any unusual encounters, anything out of the ordinary, it could make all the difference." Jason hesitated, looking down at his hands for a long moment before speaking again. "There was something strange. A few days before he died, my father got a call. He didn't say much about it, but I could tell something was bothering him. He told me it was nothing, but I'm not so sure now." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. "Call? Who was it from?" "I don't know," Jason replied, shaking his head. "He didn't tell me, but he was nervous. He kept looking over his shoulder like someone was watching him." Catherine stood up, her mind already racing with the possibilities. "I need to find out who that call was from. It's the key to everything." Days passed as Catherine and Marcus dug deeper into the case. They tracked down the phone records, hoping for a lead, but the number was untraceable. The more they investigated, the more they uncovered. There were whispers in the political world, murmurs about powerful individuals who had a vested interest in silencing Lucas and his foundation. Some of the highest-ranking politicians in Texas, as well as several influential corporate magnates, had been involved in shady dealings over the years. The deeper Catherine got, the more she realized that Lucas's death wasn't just an isolated tragedy. It was part of something much bigger, One evening, Catherine and Marcus met in her office to go over the findings. "We've been chasing shadows," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Every lead we follow seems to hit a wall. Someone's covering their tracks really well." Catherine looked at him, determination in her eyes. "I don't care who they are, Marcus. We're going to bring them down. Lucas and my grandfather deserve justice." Suddenly, the phone rang, breaking the silence in the room. Catherine picked it up, her heart racing as she listened. "What? Where?" she asked, her voice shaking with urgency. "We'll be there right away." She hung up the phone and turned to Marcus. "They found something. We're going to the morgue." Catherine and Marcus arrived at the morgue just as the coroner was about to perform the autopsy on Lucas's body. The results were inconclusive. The initial cause of death appeared to be a gunshot wound, but there were other signs of foul play. Catherine Scoot told her there was more to this story than just a botched robbery. As they stood in the sterile, cold room, the coroner handed Catherine the evidence they had found. Hidden beneath Lucas' shirt was a small folded piece of paper, a note that hadn't been there before. Catherine unfolded it, her hands trembling, as she read the short message. "Stop digging or you're next." The chill of the words sent a wave of fear through her. Someone was trying to intimidate her, trying to keep her from the truth. "We're not backing down," Catherine said, determination hardening in her voice. "We are going to find out who's behind this." Catherine paced back and forth in her apartment, her mind racing. The note hidden beneath Lucas's shirt felt like a personal threat. The words echoed in her head, their message clear. "Stop digging or you're next." Her blood ran cold as she thought about the lengths those behind Lucas's death were willing to go to. But giving up was not an option. Her grandfather had spent his life building the foundation to help those in need, and Lucas had been a part of that legacy. They both deserved justice, and she wouldn't rest until it was served. She glanced out the window at the city skyline, the bright lights of Austin flickering beneath the dark sky. It felt like the world was closing in on her. But she wasn't afraid. She knew she had to stay focused, and the only way to bring peace to Lucas's memory was to follow the trail to the very end, no matter where it led. The next morning, Catherine arrived at the Heart of Austin Foundation office early. Jason was already there, pacing around the room, deep in thought. The weight of the investigation seemed to be taking a toll on him. His father's death had left an emptiness in his eyes that Catherine could feel even without saying a word. He had always admired his father's calm demeanor, but now the world seemed uncertain and confusing to him. He was angry, confused, and struggling to find his place in a world that had become so unstable. "I've been thinking about the note," Jason said, breaking the silence. His voice was tight, strained with emotion. "It's not just a warning. It's a message. Someone knew we would find that note. They wanted to make sure we knew we were crossing the line." Catherine nodded slowly. "Exactly. This is bigger than just one man's death. It's a power struggle, and it goes deeper than we thought. We're not dealing with random criminals here. We're dealing with something much more organized." Jason walked over to the window, staring out at the street below. "Who would want my father dead, though? He wasn't hurting anyone." Catherine stepped closer to him, her voice calm yet filled with conviction. "It's not about your father. It's about what he represented. He was a leader. He was advocating for change. Real systemic change. And that's a threat to the status quo." Jason turned, meeting her gaze. "So we're talking about powerful people. People who will stop at nothing to protect their interests." "That's exactly it," Catherine replied, her jaw tight. "And we're in their crosshairs now. But we won't stop." "We can't stop." Jason's eyes softened, and he nodded. "I'm with you, Catherine. Let's find out who did this." The first step was to revisit Lucas' personal belongings. Catherine and Jason went through his office at the foundation, searching for any clues that might provide more insight into the days leading up to his death. As they sifted through papers, Catherine came across a folder labeled "Confidential." She opened it carefully, finding documents related to a series of high-profile corporate deals involving some of the city's wealthiest figures. Lucas had been in the process of investigating potential corruption within these companies, linking them to local government officials. "This is it," Catherine whispered, her heart pounding. "This is the information they didn't want him to have." Jason leaned over, scanning the documents. "These names, they're big players in the city. I had no idea my father was looking into this." Catherine looked up at him, her brow furrowed. Lucas was never just helping people. He was exposing the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. And now we know why they silenced him. Jason clenched his fists. "We need to ensure this information gets to the right people. We can't let it disappear." But Catherine knew it wasn't that simple. They had to be careful. The wrong move, and they could become targets just like Lucas. But she wasn't willing to back down. Not now. Not when they were so close to the truth. "We'll keep this between us for now," Catherine said. "But we need to start gathering evidence. We'll contact the right authorities when the time comes." As they prepared to take the next steps in their investigation, Catherine began to notice the signs of being watched. She would see unfamiliar cars parked outside her apartment building. A few times she caught a shadowy figure lingering near the Heart of Austin Foundation office. It was as if someone knew that they were getting close to uncovering something big, and they wanted to stop it. One night, Catherine received a phone call from Marcus. "Catherine," he said, his voice low and tense, "I've been looking into Lucas' connections. It's worse than we thought. There's a network of corruption in the highest levels of government. People are covering their tracks by eliminating anyone who gets too close." Catherine's heart sank. "How do you know this?" "I've been digging through old files, tracing the money, the connections, and I found something that links these people directly to Lucas's death. But you need to be careful. I think they're onto you. I saw a car following me last night." Her pulse quickened. "I've noticed the same thing. We can't stop now, Marcus. We have to keep going. Just promise me you'll be careful," Marcus warned. "You don't know who's watching." Catherine hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the threat closing in around her. She couldn't stop now. Lucas' death had set something in motion, a wave of truth that was unstoppable. But as she and Jason moved forward with the investigation, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched every step of the way. Catherine and Jason continued to follow the leads, piecing together the complex web of corruption that had led to Lucas' death. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous the situation became. They discovered that Lucas had been involved in a delicate investigation into corporate and government ties, which had included illegal deals, money laundering, and political manipulation. Lucas had been on the verge of exposing a scandal that could have rocked the foundation of Texas's political and corporate world. Jason's anger grew with each new discovery. They killed him because he was getting too close to the truth. They were afraid of what he would expose. Catherine nodded, her determination hardening. "This isn't just about your father anymore. It's about all of the people who have been silenced over the years. We're going to bring them down." But as the danger mounted, Catherine couldn't ignore the growing tension between her and Jason. Over the course of their investigation, their bond had deepened. What started as a professional relationship had slowly evolved into something more personal. Catherine found herself drawn to him, his quiet strength, and his unwavering commitment to his father's legacy. She had spent so many years pushing aside emotions for the sake of her work. But now, in the heat of their shared struggle, she found herself falling for him. One evening, as they sat in her apartment going over the latest findings, Jason turned to her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before: vulnerability. "Catherine," he began, his voice soft, "I don't know what to do anymore. My father's death, it's torn everything apart. But I can't do this without you. You're the only one who's been there through all of this. Catherine felt her heart race, her throat tightening. "Jason, I don't know what to say." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." For a moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in the quiet room. Catherine's mind raced, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. The time had come. Catherine and Jason had gathered enough evidence to confront the people behind the conspiracy. They had pieced together the connections, and they knew who was responsible for Lucas's death. But as they prepared to make their move, the shadow of danger loomed large. That night, they met with a trusted source who had access to the inner workings of the political and corporate world. With his help, they were able to expose the names behind the conspiracy. Powerful individuals who had manipulated the system for their own gain. But their victory came at a cost. As they left the meeting, they were ambushed. A black car pulled up, and men wearing masks rushed toward them, guns drawn. Jason pushed Catherine to the ground, shielding her with his own body. In that moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Sounds drowned out by the rush of adrenaline in her veins. But they weren't going to give up. The sounds of rushing footsteps and a pounding heart were all Catherine could hear as she lay on the ground, Jason's body protecting hers. She felt the heat of the night air pressing in, the world spinning around her. The gunshots rang out, loud and sharp, but Jason shielded her with his own body, taking the brunt of the blows. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw him wince, but he didn't let go of her. For a moment, everything was chaos. The men shouting orders, the sound of tires screeching on the gravel road, and the flashes of gunfire lighting up the night. But through it all, Catherine's mind sharpened with focus. She had to survive. She had to finish what they had started. "Jason!" she cried, her voice hoarse from the panic gripping her chest. She tried to push him off her, but he was heavy, his body draped protectively over hers. "Stay down!" Jason's voice was strained, but his hand never left hers. "We're not out of this yet." Catherine squeezed his hand, her fingers trembling. She didn't want to lose him, not now, not when they were so close to exposing the truth. The conspiracy had grown too powerful, too deep, and the people behind it would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. But there was no way she was going to let them win. Not after everything they had been through. As the attackers closed in, Catherine reached for the gun hidden beneath her jacket. She had trained for moments like this, moments when she would need to fight to survive. Her hand closed around the cold metal of the weapon, and she aimed it carefully. Without a moment's hesitation, she fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the night. One of the attackers fell, but there were still others closing in, the darkness of the night blurring their shapes. "We need to get out of here," Jason grunted, pushing himself up slightly, but his body was weak. His breath came in short, labored bursts. Blood stained his shirt, and his face was pale. Catherine knew they couldn't stay. She grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. With Jason's help, they made their way to the alleyway, ducking low to avoid being seen. "Over here," Jason said, his voice low, urgent. He pulled her toward a narrow entrance hidden behind a rusted gate. They rushed inside, hearts pounding as they heard the footsteps of their pursuers echoing in the distance. They were safe, but for how long? Catherine didn't have the luxury of asking that question. She had already made up her mind. They would not stop until they brought the conspiracy to light, no matter the cost. The following weeks were a blur of investigation, fear, and determination. Catherine and Jason knew they were being watched, but they kept moving forward. With the help of Marcus, their trusted ally, and other key figures from the Foundation, they pieced together the final threads of the conspiracy. The corruption was deeper than they had ever imagined. They uncovered links between major political figures, powerful corporations, and shadowy figures operating behind the scenes. These were the people who had orchestrated Lucas's assassination, hoping to silence him before he could expose their illegal dealings. They had used him as a pawn, and when he became too dangerous to their plans, they had eliminated him. But Catherine wasn't willing to let them win. She and Jason worked tirelessly, collecting evidence, speaking with insiders, and coordinating with law enforcement until they had everything they needed. The moment of truth was drawing near. They had compiled enough proof to take down the people responsible for Lucas' death, and perhaps even a few others in the process. But the final confrontation was still to come. It would take all of their strength, all of their courage to expose the conspiracy. And there was still one question that hung in the air like a dark cloud. Who was pulling the strings behind all of this? Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that there was someone even more powerful, more dangerous than the individuals they had already uncovered. A shadowy figure, hidden in plain sight, had been orchestrating everything from the beginning. The investigation reached a boiling point one evening when Marcus came to Catherine with new information. "You're not going to believe this," he said, holding up a folder filled with documents. Catherine took the folder from him, her heart racing as she flipped through the pages. "What is it?" "It's about the money," Marcus said grimly. "We traced the funds from Lucas' last investigation to an offshore account. But the account, it's linked to someone inside the government. Someone with a lot of influence." Catherine's blood ran cold. Marcus hesitated, his fingers trembling slightly. "It's Senator William Carter." Catherine's mind reeled. Senator William Carter was one of the most powerful figures in Texas politics. A man who had long been known for his connections to corporate giants and his ability to manipulate the system for his own benefit. But the revelation that he had been involved in Lucas' death, that he was behind the conspiracy, shocked her to her core. "How could we not have seen this before?" Catherine muttered, staring at the documents in disbelief. "Carter's been untouchable. He's always had his hands in everything, but no one dared to question him. That's why Lucas was killed," Marcus said quietly. "He was getting too close. He was about to expose everything. Carter's connections to the corporations, the bribes, the money laundering. If he'd gone public with that information, it would destroyed everything Carter had built." Catherine's fists clenched. "He's been playing us all along. We can't let him get away with this," Jason said, his voice filled with resolve. "We have to take him down, no matter what it costs." Catherine turned to him, her eyes fierce. "We will." The time had come to confront Senator William Carter. Catherine, Jason, and Marcus devised a plan to gather the final evidence they needed to bring Carter to justice. It would require careful coordination, and there was no room for error. But this was their last chance to expose the conspiracy, and they couldn't back down now. Catherine and Jason approached the senator's estate under the cover of darkness. They knew the risks. If they were caught, their lives would be at risk. But there was no turning back. They had to do this. For Lucas, for the people who had been silenced, for the justice that had been denied for so long. Inside the estate, Carter was hosting a lavish dinner with several powerful guests. Catherine and Jason slipped in through a side entrance, using the cover of the large estate to stay hidden from the guards. They made their way to Carter's private office, where they knew the final documents were stored. With the help of Marcus, who was on the outside providing technical support, they managed to crack the security system and access the files. The documents they found were damning. Carter's involvement in the assassination plot, the money laundering, the bribes, and more. It was everything they needed to expose him for the criminal he was. As Catherine held the folder in her hands, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. They had been discovered. "Jason, go!" Catherine whispered urgently. "It'll cover you." Jason hesitated but nodded. "Be careful, Catherine." With the evidence in hand, Jason sprinted toward the back exit. Catherine turned to face the door as it burst open, guards rushing in. Her heart raced, but she was prepared for this. She had come too far to fail now. A tense standoff followed, but Catherine managed to escape with the evidence. Just as the authorities arrived, the plan had worked. They had everything they needed to bring down Senator William Carter. The final days of the investigation had been a whirlwind of relentless action. Every step they took brought them closer to the truth, and every twist of the plot seemed more dangerous than the last. But at last, the evidence Catherine and Jason had worked so hard to uncover was undeniable. With each document, each connection, the corruption that had entangled Lucas's death began to unravel, exposing the darkest corners of power. The media had quickly seized the story, and the public's response was immediate. The anger was palpable, but so was the relief. Catherine could feel it in the air. The people who had been silenced for so long were finally speaking out, and for once, the truth was being heard. Senator Carter's empire of lies was crumbling, and his involvement in Lucas's assassination and the illegal dealings that had stretched across the city was no longer a secret. As the final pieces of the investigation fell into place, Catherine found herself standing beside Jason, the weight of their journey pressing down on her. The victory was hard-earned, and there was a quiet pride in her heart that slowly began to push away the grief that had hung over her for so long. The Heart of Austin Foundation, the legacy Lucas had left behind, would continue to thrive. His death hadn't been in vain. It had sparked something. A fire that couldn't be extinguished. Jason stood close to her, the exhaustion of the months-long investigation etched on his face. But there was a smile on his lips, a quiet, contented smile that told Catherine everything they had fought for was worth it. "We did it," Jason said, his voice soft but firm. "We brought him down." Catherine turned to him, her heart swelling with emotion. She nodded, her throat tight with the weight of what they had accomplished. "Yes, we did. And now we rebuild. We keep fighting for Lucas, for all of us." She felt the cool breeze of the early morning air on her face as the first light of dawn broke over Austin's skyline. The streets below were still empty, the world quiet in that early hour before the city fully awoke. It was a peaceful moment, and for a fleeting second, Catherine allowed herself to just breathe, to appreciate how far they had come. For so long, her world had been dominated by pain and uncertainty. But standing here, next to Jason, watching the sun rise over a city that had been forever changed, Catherine could feel the warmth of hope spreading through her. The investigation was over. But the work was just beginning. The fight for justice, for equality, for the rights of the oppressed. This was the future she would help shape. Together, she and Jason would carry on Lucas' legacy, making sure that the fight he had started would never end. Jason turned to face her, his expression earnest. "Catherine, there's something I need to tell you." Catherine met his gaze, her heart still racing from the intensity of everything that had happened. She had grown so close to him over the past months, relying on him in ways she had never imagined. His quiet strength had been a constant source of support. And as their shared journey drew to a close, Catherine realized just how much he meant to her. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason took a slow breath, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for her. I don't know how to say this, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. She had felt it too, but hearing him say it out loud made everything real. The quiet connection between them had grown into something undeniable, something deeper than either of them had expected. Despite the years that had separated them, despite the differences in their backgrounds, there was something between them that no one could take away. "I don't know what the future holds," Jason continued, his voice quiet but steady, "but I want you in it. I want to be with you." Catherine stood frozen for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. She had spent so much time focused on the fight for justice, on uncovering the truth about Lucas's death, that she had never allowed herself to consider anything else. But now, as she looked into Jason's eyes, she realized that this wasn't just about their mission anymore. This was about them, about two people who had found something in each other that transcended the pain and the struggles they had faced. Without thinking, Catherine stepped forward, closing the space between them. Her heart was racing, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel everything: the relief, the love, the hope that had been buried beneath the weight of their journey. As she stood before him, the world around them seemed to fade away. All that mattered was the connection they shared. Jason's eyes softened, his hands reaching up to gently cup her face, and in that quiet moment, under the rising sun, Catherine kissed him. It was a soft, tentative kiss, but it spoke volumes. A promise, a reassurance, a declaration of everything they had fought for, and everything they would continue to fight for. For a few seconds, the world stood still. The events of the past months, the pain, the loss, the danger, it all melted away. All that was left was the two of them, standing together in the stillness of the morning, holding on to each other in a world that was beginning to feel a little bit brighter. As they broke apart, Catherine felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. It wasn't just the victory over the corrupt powers that had controlled the city. It was this. It was Jason. It was knowing that the future, despite its uncertainties, was theirs to shape. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Together, they could face anything. Jason smiled softly, his fingers brushing against her cheek. "You're going to be okay, Catherine. I promise." She nodded, her heart full. "Yes, we will." And in that moment, Catherine knew that they had not only found justice for Lucas, but they had found something even more precious: love. And no matter where the future took them, they would always fight together side by side.